Hello, everyone. Welcome to this I4C workshop on the voluntary carbon market, presented to you by Wuppertal Institute. Now, as the title of this event, Avoiding a Mismatch Between Demand and Supply, what do buyers really expect from the voluntary carbon market suggests, we are going to look mainly at the buyer's side of voluntary activities by companies today, which has gained considerable amount of attention recently. Well-known buzzwords you're all familiar with include science-based targets, net zero, and Paris alignment. As time is limited on these online I4C workshops, we're directly going to start, and I'm quite happy to present to you our distinguished presenters and panelists. First of all, we have Marlene Ahlberg, Deputy Head of Division at the German Environment Ministry, who will provide input on the policy side of the market and elaborate on the ministry's perspective on the voluntary carbon market. Then we have Daniela Feuchtmeier, Senior Manager, Sustainability Strategy and Steering at BMW Group. She's going to present on BMW's SBTI strategy and views on what companies such as BMW expect from the voluntary carbon market. Then we have Nico Kreivich of Wuppertal Institute, who is going to introduce us to the world of the voluntary carbon market after Paris in general, and a view onto companies' activities and the net zero pledges in particular. Last not least, we have Florian Eickholt, climate finance and environmental markets expert at Atmosphere, who will explain the Atmosphere perspective on the voluntary markets and their answer to the Paris Agreement challenges. Inputs will be followed by a moderated panel discussion. My name is Christoph Ahrens, and I have the pleasure to take you through the next 50 minutes. Now, a few technical remarks at the beginning. Due to the limited time available, we will not be able to take questions from the audience at this session. And for the same reason, we will also not be able to deal with questions or conversations in parallel in the chat function. However, participants will be able to provide their views in a short polling exercise during the session. And with this, we will directly turn to Nico Kreivich of Wuppertal Institute, who's going to set the scene for us and explain how the conditions of the voluntary carbon market changed under the Paris Agreement, the dynamic emergence of net zero targets, and alternative concepts on how to deal with the Paris-related challenges. Nico, you have the floor, and please turn on your camera while speaking.
Thank you very much, Christoph. I will now give you a brief introduction to the topic by first looking into the demand side. On the next slide, you see the illustration of net zero pledges. As you all know, what we're experiencing at the moment is really a proliferation of net zero pledges. We have analyzed net zero pledges by large companies. We have found 482 large companies that have communicated some sort of neutrality target or net zero target. And in this exercise, in this analysis, we built on different sources, including Oxford Net Zero database, New Climate Institute's database, and also the NASCA platform. Taken together, these large companies, which have annual revenue of more than $1 billion US, taken together, they have annual revenues of $16 trillion US. This exceeds the gross domestic product of China. So it's really a massive, large number, and also, of course, a potential demand for the voluntary carbon market. So what's also striking is that there is a large diversity in terms of the sectors. As you can see here from the slide, net zero targets have been communicated by very diverse companies and from different sectors, including the steel industry, cement, and or aviation sector. And some of these companies and sectors will have challenges or will have difficulties in really completely phasing out their GHG emissions. So there is plenty of room for offsetting, theoretical room. But yeah, this observation was also confirmed when looking at the information provided by companies. Only 36 out of the 482 companies we have analyzed clearly exclude the use of offsets. So around 45% say that they will be using offsets, while the rest has not provided information in this regard. So taken together, there's really a significant theoretical potential for offsets that could drive the voluntary carbon market. On the next slide, you will see that, yeah, this potentially large demand meets uncertain supply. The Paris Agreement has induced a paradigm shift by introducing ambitious targets and by being global in scope. So this reduces the uncapped environment, which has been the origin of voluntary carbon market units in the past. And it requires all countries to adopt ambitious nationally determined contributions. So this development at the international level raises fundamental questions. So one key question is whether double claiming between corporates and national governments should be allowed, or whether it should be avoided through corresponding adjustments. And closely linked to that question, there's the one question whether there is a need for new approaches that go beyond the net zero offsetting paradigm. For instance, the contribution claim approach. As you can see here in the figure below, there's many question marks regarding the need for corresponding adjustments. And as Christoph already mentioned, we'll have a poll later on. So I'm looking forward to your responses to these questions. The voluntary carbon market as such has not provided a uniform answer to these questions, but there are being discussed very diverse solutions at the moment. But what are possible options to ensure the credibility and the of the market, the credibility and the integrity of the market? I think, and there's also a finding from our research we're doing for the environmental ministry of Germany, is that there is two approaches that should be kept separate. One is the carbon neutrality approach, where units should be backed up by corresponding adjustment. And the second approach could be contribution claim approach, where units would not be backed by corresponding adjustments, but used to assist countries in achieving their NDCs. However, both approaches require decisive action. So for the carbon neutrality approach, there is adjustments, and also host countries corresponding adjustments. The contribution claim approach also needs action. So you would have a collaboration among key players in the market to establish this contribution claim as a new label in the market. And in particular, I think in the long term, there's a rethinking of the carbon neutrality as a target definition is necessary. So these are my main introductory remarks, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you. Back to you, Christoph.
Thanks very much, Nico. We will, without further ado, change to our next speaker, Marlene Ahlberg of the Federal Environment Ministry of Germany. She's going to give us a flavor of the recent development of the voluntary carbon market from the political point of view, and also update us on the positioning of BMU in the debate, in particular on how to ensure quality and integrity of the units used. Marlene, you have the floor.
Thank you, Christoph. Yes, I would like to put the focus on the political debate on voluntary carbon market and how this could really contribute to raise global ambition. I think right at the moment there is a window of opportunity really to shape the future of the voluntary carbon market, but I will go into this in more details during my presentation. Next slides, please. So as Nico already mentioned, there is a growing number of corporates committed to climate targets, like SBTi is probably one of the most prominent, but there are also others. Furthermore, we have the so-called CANI task force on scaling voluntary carbon markets, which aims to multiply the demand to limit atmospheric warming to 1.5 degrees. And then furthermore, we have also the LEAF coalition, which was launched at the Biden summit last month, which aims to mobilize at least $1 billion to finance to protect tropical forests. And all these initiatives have one in common. Their aim is, or the overall aim is, to raise global ambition. Next slide, please. So the question is whether they will live up to this overall goal, and their quality matters. And I would like to mention three core criteria in this regard. First of all, do a company has a mitigation strategy to transform business to a net zero model, or do they only envisage to compensate their emission? Second, what is the role of offsets? Do they use robust environmental and social standards to estimate the emission as well as the emission reduction obtained through the offsets? And last but not least, the question of credible claiming of emission reduction credits. There it is extremely important that all forms of double counting is avoided. So therefore, from our point of view, there is only two opportunities for corporates, either to stipulate that they are climate neutral, and their corresponding adjustment is needed, as the emission reduction can only be used and claimed once. Or the second opportunity is to strive for a contribution claim or a climate responsibility claim, however you want to call it. There, the emission reduction remains in host country, and corporates need to clearly also communicate that they have supported countries in their NDC implementation, but they don't use this emission reduction for their own climate neutrality target. So, however, if all these criteria are fulfilled by companies, and also, I mean, there are also many institutions, they want to become climate neutral, we think that you can't say that this is a kind of greenwashing, as it is effective in raising ambition. Also, in regard to the both claims, they are fair and reliable. However, it has to be clear that if you choose the climate neutrality approach, that leads to even more emission reduction globally. And from our point of view, it should also be made very clear if a company wants to invest in climate neutrality, or if they want to also to contribute a part to the NDC implementation. I think there are also reasons to choose the second claim. Next slide, please. So in the run-up to COP26, we will have, or we see already, a lively debate in the voluntary carbon market. Stakeholders are trying to find their way, how they want to go forward, and how to put the voluntary carbon market into the Paris Agreement framework. And for sure, I would say it would be good to have some guidance in order to be very clear, and that companies knows what kind of approach is credible. And there, in this regard, I would like to highlight the G7 minister communique, climate and environmental minister communique last Friday. there they announced that it is important that carbon market mechanism, including those used for voluntary purpose, should be based on robust rules and accounting that ensure avoidance of all forms of double counting. I think that it makes it quite clear in which direction the journey should go. Furthermore, Gold Standard is working on voluntary carbon market transition framework, which is to be finalized for the COP in Glasgow as well. So there we will get guidance how to deal with this uncertain next 2-3 years until we really have, hopefully, really will have all the institutional capacity in place in countries for doing corresponding adjustment, to do approval, as well as to track the emission reductions. And finally, I would like to highlight also the umbrella platform, Voluntary Carbon Market Integrity Initiative, which is has been launched by UK and the Children Investment Funds this year, which aims to create coherence between different civil society actors and provide authoritative guidance on how voluntary carbon credits can be used by corporates. So in all, I would say there will be more guidance throughout the year, and we will have a lively discussion on where the journey will go. And as I already explained, from BMU has a quite clear position what the direction should be. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Marlene, for this rich and also up-to-date tour de table of the political landscape, including your positioning. Yeah, I think, as you said, the number of recent initiatives clearly displays the need of coherence and of guidance on quality, as you clearly pointed out. Yeah, we will now turn to a buyer's perspective. And I'm very happy to have Daniela Feuchtmeier of the BMW Group here with us today. Daniela is going to inform us on BMW's science-based target and the related sustainability strategy. She's also going to present views on the challenges that were just laid out related to the new concepts, for example, the contribution claim with regard to communication and marketing. Daniela, you have the floor.
Thank you, Christoph. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Just in case you missed the start of our workshop, my name is Daniela Feuchtmeier. I'm representing today the BMW Group, and if you want, the demand side of the voluntary CO2 market, or at least one player within it. Before we look at the voluntary carbon market and how BMW uses it, allow me to start with the backbone of our CO2 strategy, without which, click please, thank you, offsetting in our view wouldn't have made sense. So in mid-2020, you might have seen or read about it, we announced science-based targets. We focus on the next 10 years, which was a very conscious choice to only focus on the time till 2030 for now, because we wanted to set targets for the foreseeable future, for which the current management can commit to and be held accountable for also. So when we say -1/3 of the footprint by 2030 per vehicle, this means, click please, a -20% target for the supply chain, a -80% aim for scope 1 and 2, and a minimum of -40% for the use phase, each on a 2019 baseline per vehicle. Now, increasing fleet electrification means that the supply chain will be the toughest and most important cookie to crack of the displayed 3 in front of you here, which is why we set such a firm and also tangible commitment of an SBTI-backed supply chain target for CO2 reduction by measures, only by measures. With this only, I say, but this is the toughest part, meaning that we do not apply offsetting certificates within the supply chain to reach this goal. With this, we are currently the only OEM to set such a target for the supply chain. So the role of electrification and supply chain becomes evident in depth on the next slide, please. On average, across the entire fleet on a 2019 view, we used 10 tons of CO2 per vehicle in the upstream part of our value chain. Due to the big CO2 backpack, the high impact in CO2 that every electric vehicle incurs before it's driving its first mile, this would increase to 14 tons per vehicle in 2030, without measures, that is, just to the change in sold vehicles, so more fully electric vehicles in our volume mix. We now have to reverse this development, of course. So the minus 20% means we have to lose 2 tons against the 2019 baseline per vehicle by 2030. But really, this is instead of adding another 4, which in all up, the whole effort is a much higher one than this minus 20% might look like. But we're looking at really mitigating 6 tons per vehicle solely in the upchain value chain part. So how are we now going about this task? On the right-hand side, click please. Thank you. We see an rough analysis of our main supply chain CO2 drivers by material type. It's probably no surprise to many of you that you find here the largest chunks for high voltage batteries, steel, light metals such as aluminium, and polymers, thermoplastics. On to the mitigation levers now. Beyond green energy, which is great as a short-term measure for CO2 reduction, we are currently building up a quite comprehensive circular economy approach, looking at solutions such as monomaterial quotas, designed for recycling and dismantling ease. But this is really more than an approach. This is a paradigm shift. As a developer or a supplier, you don't have to reason anymore why you replace a primary material with a secondary source. But really now you have to reason whenever you don't use a secondary material in concept phase or within a purchasing tender, which is quite a major for us and our processes. Having spoken about the short-term importance of green energy, here, click please. Here are some examples of where we already put our money where our mouth is, and the resulting CO2 reductions from green energy use for high voltage batteries, alloy wheels, and aluminium production sourced from using desert solar energy. But now let's move on to scope 1 and 2. Click please. Here, BMW, after many years of focus on resource efficiency, sets already a benchmark within the OEM world at 0.23 tons per vehicle used CO2 within our own production network. Since 2020, we are sourcing 100% of all our external electricity from renewable sources. And hence, we are currently tracking already below a 1.5 degree SBTI impact trajectory. The 80% target by 2030 now for scope 1 and 2 is an addition to the aforementioned facts. In light of this strong backbone, we added a net carbon neutral announcement as of 2021. and of course did a tender for voluntary high quality CO2 certificates, which is almost to be closed, but we cannot, that already to be said, not that we have Q&As in that regard, we cannot announce our partners as yet, but the tender is closed. So click please. For those temporarily unavoidable emissions within scope 1 and 2, the quality criteria for certificates purchasing were the usual externally certified additional and permanence requirements. So meaning we were looking for a due diligence carried out by Gold Standard or VCS in these regards. On top of this, of course, we were also looking for impact measurements, which we will monitor closely by a yearly impact report, meaning it was of interest to us to purchase projects into our portfolio where we could be a little bit closer on the groundwork and the developer. And I guess this now is a nice transition into our later Q&As also, the avoidance of double counting, or as we call this criteria, Paris robustness. So either by project type, meaning it was wise for our offers to avoid low hanging fruit that might be eaten up first by the NDCs, such as maybe renewable energies might be for many countries, or projects that had already a corresponding adjustment or are likely to get one. The number of SDG co-benefits, again, is probably nothing majorly new for many of you. There, of course, we tried to secure not just environmental and social integrity, but really go a step beyond and look at an impact beyond the pure CO2 written on the certificates and countable. So with this short impulse from the demand side, back over to Christoph. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Daniela, for these interesting insights into the strategy and the activities of a large industry player. Yeah, it's quite an ambitious program BMW has committed itself to, and also combined with a clear statement regarding quality criteria. I think that gives us quite interesting food for thought also for the debate later on. Now, over to our last speaker, Florian Eichold of Atmosphere, who's going to share with us insights on Atmosphere's role as a provider that is in touch with different types of buyers, from private to public, starting from individuals up to global players and governments.
Thank you very much, Christoph. As said in the beginning of the presentation, my name is Florian Eichold. My task at Atmosphere is the alignment of projects and processes with the Paris Agreement. Next slide, please. Yeah, Atmosphere is a non-profit organization, a project development operator since 2009, funded by the German Ministry, or funded as a spin-off by the German Ministry of Environment in 2005. All projects are certified under the UNFCCC CDM standard and Gold Standard, and Atmosphere is perceived as leading project developer in terms of quality and integrity. Next slide, please. Yeah, what do buyers really expect from the voluntary car market? I think we heard it before by previous speakers, reliable units that stand for environmental integrity and real climate impact. Buyers need to avoid double counting and assure by this consistent claims. Tangible high impact projects are crucial. And in these difficult times, buyers need clarity and orientation from trustworthy partners to navigate through the transition process. Next slide, please. I guess this is just a short overview where Atmosphere is placed. I guess that's also one of the reasons why we have been invited to this panel. We are somewhere between the demand and supply, but I would like to broaden the view a little bit beyond the companies and beyond the projects or project developers. At the demand side, we need to consider consumers and their expectations towards the companies who make use of the voluntary carbon market. And on the supply side, host countries at the moment are of high importance, host countries with their NDCs. And they are the major players, the important players when it comes to authorizing process and implementing rules and processes to avoid double counting by corresponding adjustments. Of course, standards, international multilateral standards, UNFCCC standards, as well as voluntary carbon markets and civil society organizations are crucial to assure environmental integrity and suitability of units. Next slide, please. Clustering a little bit the demand side, expectations and necessities, I guess, are totally different. Of course, we think a lot about large companies and their need to purchase reliable, suitable units. They have a international view and they lead market through their large impact action and visibility. But also we need to think about maybe more flexible small and medium-sized enterprises. They are crucial for scaling the voluntary carbon market. I put as well here another cluster element that I call change agents. Change agents, I will later mention the example from New Climate Institutes, players in the market, that innovate, come up with new approaches, for example, the contribution claim products, and test this in practice. These elements of new elements of the voluntary carbon market are maybe we have to observe them closely because they may end up at the larger scaled market and serve large companies or small and medium-sized enterprises. Next slide, please. I will run you through now some of the elements we are doing at Atmosphere in this field of aligning the voluntary carbon market with the Paris Agreement. Next slide, please. Of course, developing high impact projects. If you look at, for example, the Atmosphere Biogas program in Nepal or Cookstove program in Rwanda, you see that there is these projects make a huge difference to the entire carbon footprint of the countries. But there has to be also a tangible difference. Companies and users of units have to see the impact that projects make in the countries, and the trust by host country governments through an approval of this project is crucial now, and especially when it comes to the discussion about corresponding adjustments and aligning projects with national policies. Next slide, please. This is just an example about energy transition and rural electrification in Madagascar. Energy transition at municipal or country level is key for achieving the Paris Agreement objectives. These projects make a huge difference. Next slide, please. We are in the dialogue with host countries about how to deal with, how to manage, how to avoid double counting. And I'm very proud here to announce that we have agreed on the first corresponding adjustment agreement in the voluntary carbon market with the government of Nepal, assuring that the biogas program we developed together with our Nepali partners will issue units that can also be used as offsets in the future, assuring that double counting is avoided. Next slide, please. Together with New Climate Institute, we developed a project that produces heat and renewable energy. And this project is used as a contribution claim project within the climate responsibility approach of New Climate Institute. Next slide, please. There as well, it is very important to mention the guidance documents we are collaborating. There is this transition framework, previously it was mentioned, supported by the Federal Ministry of Environment and implemented by Gold Standard. And as well, we collaborated in a guidebook for the Environmental Ministry of Baden-Württemberg that helps companies to navigate through this transition phase. Next slide, please. And with that, thank you very much, and back to you, Christoph.
Yeah, thanks very much, Florian. Very interesting presentation, and also bringing us some breaking news on your recent agreements with Nepal, and we're quite keen to hear more on this during the discussion, which we'll have to start soon. But let me, before start our short interactive element. So if I could ask the technician to start the poll function. We prepared 2 questions for our participants, which are on display now. So if you kindly take part in the poll as we proceed, the results will be displayed at the end of the session. Now, this brings us to our panel discussion, and due to the short time available, I'd like to kindly ask all our presenters and panelists to turn on their videos now. I'm going to stop the presentation, and I would like to, first of all, start the conversation in discussing the market challenges. And as we discussed at different occasions here now, a lack of clarity regarding the integration of the voluntary carbon market into the Paris Agreement architecture is something that we face. And I'd like to ask Daniela, how does BMW deal with these challenges, and what do you need as a buyer to navigate these discussions? What kind of support do you expect from governments and maybe also from civil society and academia?
Well, I guess the overarching principle is that if we already spend money on top, as I said, on top of all the mitigation measures that we apply to our core value chain, then I want to be sure that there is a real impact, and that is CO2 wise, but also on a societal area. So when I look at that, of course, I already mentioned the criteria of Paris robustness, so that I don't need any double counting. Otherwise, the money that I spend from my side is useless for the worldwide action. But when you ask me about a wish list, I would have, for the next tender, when we look at, looking for the needle in a haystack really is how it felt sometimes for real quality offsetting projects. I would wish for a KPI that makes it clear which impact investors' money has in a project. So something that makes the projects easier to compare at face value, not having to go through a half-year process, thereby developing quite a steep learning curve, but really, when more players come to the market, not everybody might want to go through such a process. So a KPI as a guidance to see immediately what difference I really make when I choose which path in an RFQ, something like percentage of investment within the overall project I have as an investor, something like maybe additionality intensity, if you like. So an added layer of transparency on top of the number of SDGs that, of course, everybody is looking for. Further on my wish list, looking at our neutrality claim, I'd like to have had in our tender more clarity on criteria applied to make a project additional also in Germany, the US, the EU, under Paris rules would have been really useful. What is there to come? So what are the national and federal accounting mechanisms? Which solutions and which sectors may be outside an NDC and with which likelihood? I would have preferred to be able to choose some projects that are a little bit closer, even geographically, on top of our engagement for LDCs. That would have also been attractive, of course, from an impact monitoring aspect. And last, midterm, and then I'll come to an end with my wish list. Since natural-based solutions will become increasingly relevant as we move through this net zero process, a more reliable assessment method in terms of additionality and permanence would have really helped a great deal. Also to widen up the choice of engagements that I consider as logic for us with a quite high ambition level also in offsetting, not just in measures. So hence, to be able to future-proof my invests and still be credible with a neutrality claim. It's my list for Santa Claus.
Thanks very much, Daniela, for these for the different layers of challenges you're addressing the market with. That's quite interesting. And I'd like to turn now to the political side and ask Marlene Ahlberg on based on what we just heard, how do you view your activities? What kind of support activities does BMU have, and what goals do you pursue with these activities?
Yes, first of all, I would like to react on the wish list of Daniela. I mean, we are very much aware of that companies would like to have a project more near to their base. First of all, I think that has also something to do with the visibility of what you are doing and where do you invest your money. And also a little bit in direction what you said, firstly, what exactly is the impact of your engagement? And I mean, there I would say, first of all, you have the tons. I mean, that is a metric which is really, I mean, probably you think it's too far away, but at the end, it's really something what has been calculated, and it really has happened. So I think that is quite a lot, first of all. And second, if you want to have a project within Germany, it's a little bit, it's really challenging to find solution for a climate project within Germany. It is possible. At the one hand, you can do a set aside called through European credits, either through the EU ETS or also out of the effort sharing regulation. However, that means additional costs, and therefore it's probably not so attractive for companies to choose this approach. Of course, you could also argue the government should elaborate on their own, the federal state and the government together, a kind of set aside that could happen, that could, or how to say, we could explore politically on this option. And then, of course, you can always have this contribution claim within Germany as well. And I think, especially in the nature-based solution project activities, there you will find a lot of additional projects as well. And also do back up with international credits. But there, I mean, for the climate, it's it doesn't matter where the emission reduction take place. So I think really the main issue is that company has its mitigation strategy, which BMW has, and furthermore, and then of course also to find a good project, preferably with corresponding adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. As usual, time's short in these events. Florian, let's have a quick glance at the supply side. What is your take on the potential of developing countries to supply high quality credits, especially with regard of your recent agreement with Nepal and others?
Yeah, I think I would like to send a very positive signal here. I think host countries are willing to engage in discussions around corresponding adjustments. However, it is of course difficult. There is still a mandate missing from the international climate negotiations, and of course it is challenging also to implement these corresponding adjustments. They need robust accounting systems. Host countries need a lot of support to build that up, to make sure that corresponding adjustments and double counting is really avoided. Well, I think I mentioned the Nepal agreement here because I think it is very good to know that it is possible to achieve corresponding adjustments agreements.
Okay, thanks very much. Then Nico has the final chance to have a short wrap up on how to avoid a mismatch between demand and supply within 2 minutes. Nico, can we challenge you?
2 seconds, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely challenging. How to avoid a mismatch? I think, yeah, we've touched upon many issues here. One thing is corresponding adjustments. Agreeing, I'm very happy about the news from Nepal and atmosphere, agreeing on corresponding adjustments. I think that's a really positive development. Still, I think that will continue being challenging to agree on corresponding adjustments, and that in the long run, with so many expectations on the demand side to buy carbon credits, what is really needed are new models, such as the contribution claim, in order, to have additional models and also to contribute to climate change mitigation in the long run. Not to totally leave carbon neutrality behind at the company level. I think that's not the way we want to go. I think it's a positive momentum we're seeing here, with companies committing to climate neutrality, but still there's a need to go a step further and develop new approaches and think out of the box. That's my take.
Right, thanks very much, Nico. This brings us already to the end of this short session. If I could ask the technician to show the results of the poll quickly now here at the very end. We see quite an appetite for corresponding adjustments, and we also see a little bit of a mixed picture for alternative models such as the contribution claim. So this, I think, gives us good flavor for continuing the discussion. Thanks very much to all our panelists, to Daniela Feuchtmeier, to Marlene Ahlberg, to Florian Eickholt, and also to Nico Kreivich. Hope to see you all again in one of the other I4C sessions this week. Thanks very much for participating, and goodbye for now.